You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we're discussing Purina Hall of Fame, track number 14 on Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And I'm guessing, Greg, for many people, this is probably considered to be the greatest propaganda song of all time.
It's very possible.
And I want to actually look at the credits and acknowledgments in the CD booklet, which I still have.
Oh my God.
I still have CDs. Yeah. And in that, I'm going to read just the first part and the last part. It says, sincere debts of gratitude are owed to many people. Flying drop kicks to the head are owed to others. Suffice to say, you should know who you are and you should know who you aren't. What goes around comes around. Thank you. It gives a little bit idea of like the feeling and the tone of what went into this album and maybe how difficult it was. And then skipping past the credit parts, it says here, God tried to stop us from putting this record out. He broke legs, severed fingers, pinched nerves, stole voices, flooded basements, sabotaged frame rates, stampeded moose, and unleashed plagues of naysayers and grown-ups to try to hold us back. And though we walked through the valley of the shadow of posers, we fought our way out the other side, rocking harder and faster than ever to deliver this record unto y'all with every ounce of heart we got in us. And as lovers of fast music since childhood, dedicated to the lives lived in the margins, locked in the prisons, and lost on the gallows, this is for everybody. May all your thrash be progressive. Chris, Jordan, Todd.
I absolutely love those liner notes. I haven't actually read that in a long time because I don't have a CD copy of this album anymore, but man, those are great liner notes, aren't they? I just love that note.
I'm a 37-year-old, 17-year-old. I still lay on my bed and listen to music while just combing through the booklets or the LP while listening to the album.
Yeah, and now we get to raise our kids while modeling that sort of behavior to them. Right. And you know what? I am 100% cool with that. I don't know about you, but I'm all good. So whenever I was preparing for this, I was thinking about the title a lot, okay? Purina Hall of Fame. And so what is the Purina Hall of Fame? Listeners might be wondering. Well, from Purina.ca, the Canadian website of Purina, at Purina, we understand that pets and people have a remarkable connection, and it's this unique bond that is celebrated through the Purina Animal Hall of Fame. The Purina Animal Hall of Fame is the longest-running Canadian pet recognition program of its kind. To date, 182 remarkable animals with outstanding life-saving acts of animal courage and heroism have been inducted. And on the website, you can literally find the list of inducted animals going back to 1968 on Purina's website. So the actual Purina Hall of Fame is dedicated to life-saving animals, which, when you consider the gruesome nature of the introduction to this particular song, just goes to show our inability to see such quality in all animals, not just those that we see as pets. And if you listen to the wording in the statement, it says pet recognition program. So there's a very particular kind of animal that is honored for the Purina Hall of Fame, whereas others are not. So, you know, I also want to remind everybody before we start that Chris did this song already on his Patreon as episode number 4 at patreon.com/JesusHChris. And his episode 4 was 2 years ago. And listening back to Chris's episode yesterday was kind of hard because he talks about what was going on in his life when he recorded the episode. So Chris's episode is an hour and a half long. And as always, it is so good. You know, it's so highly recommended to each and every one of you to check it out if you haven't yet. This podcast is literally never going to stop promoting Chris's Patreon. So get over it. If you're like, hey, why do you guys keep talking about that? Well, it's because it's that good. So definitely go and check out episode 4 on Chris Hanna's Patreon and listen to his conversation or his thoughts and reflections on Purina Hall of Fame. You know, you mentioned earlier that this might be people's favorite propaganda song. I kind of alluded to that on Twitter the other day when I was like, hey, we're recording what may be many of your favorite or in your top 5 favorite all-time Propaganda songs. So we're going to give it our very best shot. This song is legendary for something not even involving the music. And it's this opening of this song, right? I found a great interview with Chris and Todd in issue 62 of Black Velvet magazine after the release of Supporting Cast, where they talk a little bit about Purina. And so the interviewer, her name is Sherry. And so Sherry from Black Velvet magazine asks, with your other songs, do you think you get across the messages you want to present while being tongue-in-cheek on occasion? Which songs of yours in general would you say have most inspired others or made some headway? So this is a really interesting question. What songs of yours have most inspired others? Every Propaganda song has a message of some kind, a lesson of some kind, which we talk about here.
And I can imagine this being a song where people walk up or they stay after the show, or they're, leaning onto the stage or out by the van, and where they say specifically this song impacted them. For sure, I could see this coming up.
100%. And there's a reason for this. So Chris responds to this question. He says, to be honest, I think the most effective thing we've had on our records as far as something that really jarred listeners into thinking seriously about how humans treat animals was something we didn't create. It was the audio of a farm worker kicking and beating a downed, defenseless pig that we put before the song Purina Hall of Fame. Many people have mentioned that really affected them more so than any of our songs, that's for sure. And Todd says, I think we get the message across for the most part, although one day I was on some lyrics meetings website looking at what people thought the songs were about, and almost all of them were wrong. Haha. I'm not sure which ones have been the most inspiring to people, maybe Purina Hall of Fame or some of the animal rights songs, because it's something people can easily feel and instantly do something about. But I think each song would mean something different to each person. Who knows what someone could get out of a tune? And the reason I read Todd's quote as well is because here you and I are week after week talking about Propaganda songs, and Todd's talking about looking at interpretation websites and being like, well, they totally missed the point of that, which, you and I very well may be doing every now and then here on this very podcast, which I get a great chuckle out of seeing Todd's statement there. But it was just a really interesting idea, having them think that the screaming pig at the beginning of Purina Hall of Fame was one of the most effective things they ever put in one of their songs. What do you think about that?
I think that makes a lot of sense for the right listener, maybe at the right time, when they're willing to question things or they're feeling vulnerable, and it's not just background noise. And it's really something like taking everything in together, the artwork, the citations, the suggested reading, the digital content on this, reading the lyrics and listening to the music. Yeah, that, like I said, with Chris Deutsch, you'll hear, is that this is inseparable. This part is inseparable from the rest of the song. And although I had a Purina Hall of Fame shirt in 2007 when I saw them, I didn't stop eating meat until 2010, which I don't think I really thought about that until right now, that I love the song and I kind of had the design, but I was still not really willing to challenge or think about my own interactions with the food I ate and where it came from and the consequences on living creatures.
Yeah. Well, and then this interview goes on with Sherry from Black Velvet. She says, can you tell me about the actual song meaning for Purina Hall of Fame? And did Purina hear that song? And if so, what was their reaction? And Chris responds, when an animal saves a human life, like a dog saving a drowning baby, for example, Purina adds them to their Hall of Fame. When a human saves an animal life, like a member of the Animal Liberation Front freeing a beagle from a vivisector, they are thrown in prison for the rest of their lives. It's an interesting difference. I doubt the animal exploitation industry cares that a band wrote a song about it. Todd then says Purina is a company that feeds animal parts to other animals, but they have an award for heroic animals that save humans. I'm not sure if people at Purina heard it or not. I'm sure the money they make off their company eclipses any humane thoughts that might occasionally flitter through their minds. So I really dug those quotes, framing the conversation that you and I will have here, talking about some of the conversations that you have with our guests. But before we get to the guests, I just want to say that a challenge we face making this show is when we get to songs where topics begin to overlap.
Right.
We did the humane meat episode. We did Nailing Descartes to the Wall, which are both extremely long episodes where we discuss factory farming conditions, making decisions about food and the things that we eat, the ways animals' lives are minimized as less important than human lives, even though we're animals as well. The ways humans are detached from the food they shove into their faces, and how we isolate ourselves from the systems of species oppression we are engaged in, and more. So our conversations with Dr. Lauren Corman on our Nailing Descartes to the Wall episode stands out to me as a concise conversation to me about a lot of the content we could also apply to our Purina episode. So in an effort to seek some brevity, I would strongly encourage everyone to listen to the chats that we had with Lauren Corman for an overview of the current state of the factory farming system. So we're going to try and not repeat ourselves is what I'm saying. But Keith, you extend nicely from what Lauren talked about with our first guest on this episode. So tell me a little bit about who our first guest for Purina Hall of Fame is.
Yeah, we talked to Dr. Christopher Deutsch again for Purina, and listeners will remember that Chris was our first guest on Cop Just Out of Frame, and he returned on Name and Address Withheld and on A People's History of the World. Chris is a historian of the meat industry in the United States and has a forthcoming book called Beeftopia, The Red Meat Politics of Prosperity in Post-War America. That's coming soon from the University of Nebraska Press. Chris's dissertation is called Forging a National Diet, Beef and the Political Economy of Plenty in Post-War America, which explores federal beef politics and policy. So when we think about the economics of the meat industry, the politics of why.
Yeah. So we're going to lead into this first interview with a cover of Purina Hall of Fame by the inimitable Jenn Fiorentino, who has so graciously allowed us to include a clip of her cover of Purina Hall of Fame. So we're going to chat with Chris Deutsch. We're going to hear your conversation. I'm absolutely thrilled about this conversation that you and Chris had. I'm so glad Chris is here for his fourth appearance on this podcast, and I really hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did. So please enjoy this conversation with Dr. Chris Deutsch.
Dr. Christopher Deutsch, welcome back to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you.
Chris, this is the third time that we've talked 3 times already. This is the 4th time. We had episode 3, Cop Just Out of Frame, episode 29, Name and Address Withheld, and then episode 31, A People's History of the World. So I'm really stoked to talk to you today about Purina Hall of Fame.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on so many times to talk about such an amazing band.
And Chris, I want to start with the actual audio sample at the beginning of this song. So I'm curious your thoughts about the opening sample of a sow being beaten. I'm curious, as a historian, a fan of propaganda, as just like a sentient person with feelings and emotions, what is stirred up in your heart and your mind when you hear that opening clip?
Yeah, I mean, it's talk about a powerful opening. It's hard to imagine a song, given its topic, opening more discordantly than the heartbeat with the sounds of violence at the slaughterhouse. And it's an interesting and difficult kind of opening to grapple with, because of course there is being not in the mood to be overwhelmed that way.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way when I first heard it, for sure. It was definitely what drew me, I think, to the song, and what made me kind of like go, oh, this is propaganda, from my previous love of, the less talk, more rock. The, nation states was an evergreen song, track I would play, to like this one setting a more, I don't know, I guess impactful, more resonant emotional tone.
Right.
That immediately hits with the content being, matches the content. It hits in such a way that matches that content. That is, it lets you know that this is serious and this is real. This is not playtime, and this is not a punk song for those who are missing, their girlfriends, or are annoyed that someone treated them some way. This is going to tackle a very serious topic in a very emotionally mature way by going into such an ugly sonic scape.
What I think is interesting is that probably early on when I had this album, I probably skipped the opening. I fast forwarded whenever I could, but the older I've gotten, I don't anymore. And I think it's kind of like my way of listening to music. It's not just that I like consuming an entire album. I like to listen to the whole thing. I'm not really into playlist. I don't really listen to a ton on repeat. I just like enjoying an album, and it's an inseparable part of the song. And I think it's really hard to remove it. And thinking back to Chris Hanna's Patreon podcast, when he talked about Purina, he said in the beginning, he's like, I'm not going to play that clip. I don't want to hear it. I'm tired of hearing it. And the takeaway that I got from it is not that specific clip, but someone being so immersed into animal liberation content and that sort of whether audio or video or photography that was leaked out of factory farming and the meat industry. And no, like it served its purpose, and he doesn't need it anymore to convince himself of what he's doing. Whereas I kind of have the opposite, to where I do still need those reminders to kind of to focus my vegetarianism or my choices in guiding me and making sure I don't fall back on those things that I've tried to commit myself to.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The need of kind of refreshing your mental state on what's really going on and what the stakes are, because I think you're definitely not alone in this. I mean, one of the more striking dynamics of the history of engaging with the production of meat as a project that people have been doing for a long time. My own specialization is how people have grappled with it, really post World War II, but leading into the 1980s, when the kind of audio we hear is really a product of the changes that take place in the 1980s, where before there were photos that would circulate. In fact, one of the most surprisingly successful laws that got through Congress and a very conservative president signed in the 1950s was a humane slaughter law that had as its campaign from the humane societies that pushed it were photographs of slaughterhouses. And in fact, the agricultural, the lawmakers on the agricultural committee who would be the life or death of this bill were actually toward slaughterhouses. And what they saw convinced them that things needed to change. And the central question of this concept is, like, is abuse, is harm is cruelty a core component of meat production. And the humane slaughter concept is a means of, if not saying it's not a part, at least saying it can be a minimal part to try to find mechanical processes and techniques that would minimize harm. The bolt pistol, the captive bolt gun that Chris does reference in the song. And by the 1980s, those kind of the thoughts about the inherent cruelty of meat, and particularly the mechanized industrial level slaughter, was a much more poignant question. And whole communities and organizations and activist groups were formed around confronting that very question. I mean, big, giant, famous groups like Animal Liberation Front, among them, that tried to do this kind of, in a sense, guerrilla journalism, guerrilla activism, to convince others that cruelty is not incidental, which of course the opening of this song drives home by suggesting that the cruelty we're hearing might not be so abnormal after all.
Yeah, there's this awful contrast in really thinking that, if you read about the contributions and the achievements of someone like Temple Grandin, who worked to minimize suffering and to redesign things working within the system, but also that the system itself, how much can you really reform a system of cruelty?
Yeah, and on top of that, this is definitely a bit off of the song itself, but the process of making meat got worse in this time period as well. The meat companies managed to secure a hold on the economy and a hold on the political economy, and particularly a hold on the policy making and policy implementing apparatus of the federal government in ways they hadn't been able to do before, and were able to basically push safety measures slowly but steadily out of the slaughterhouse, to the point where last year the leader of a major meat company, one of the most important parts of the food industry, felt the need to warn people that things were in danger because the meat industry was physically incapable of protecting its human workers.
Right.
Never mind the fact of how they've been able to keep incredibly dangerous diseases that have emerged on the animal side from crushing and crunching the industry. They couldn't do so for the human workers. And so the cruelty seen or heard really in the opening of the song is in some ways essentially a moment of its time when slaughterhouse work is in the process of being, as many would say, there's definitely some downsides to saying this, but essentially returning to the book The Jungle's quality of what it was like to be a meat laborer, where the stresses, the pressures, the danger is enhanced as a means of extracting more rapid production, and that an outpouring of that would be the need just to get an animal moving. So if an animal is being obstinate, if it is being if it is misbehaving, then the solutions need to be immediate and quick, let alone just enjoying cruelty for its own sake.
Right. Well, Chris, let's get into some of the other ideas in the song. And what I think Purina does really, really well, just like humane meat, is that Chris Hanna flips the logic that's in the established narratives and using them against the people who refuse to acknowledge the ways that humans have normalized and profited from animal cruelty. So in Purina, if we're willing to see animals as heroes, a human concept that we project onto animals, then why are we not willing to see them also as victims? So I'm curious about your thoughts on that theme in Purina Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's funny you bring up humane meat, because I think the more resonant follow-up to Purina is actually Potemkin City Limits with Francis.
Yeah.
Because what I see in those two songs is a continual thread where the first song, Purina, introduces the concept that animals have a destiny that humans shape. Some are honored, some are eaten, and those that are eaten are going to have to get to the follow-up prize, the conciliatory prize, the captive bolt gun, and they're the rest. They're the most. They're the rabble that aren't being honored. And we see in Francis a kind of rejoinder where Francis's escape, while honored by the slaughtering company, it's really a Potemkin city. It's a false promise of honoring when Francis's fate was his mother's fate.
Yeah.
It is to end up on a dinner plate through a mechanical process of slaughtering and deconstruction and reconstruction into a human food product. And the suffering is minimized for the second song, which I think makes it a poetic follow-up, because then we get to see, the blade of light, the dodge, the months of running free, the remembrances of the mother, this kind of like anthropomorphizing, speaking of what Purina, its company itself did,
Right.
but to kind of give an animal a name and a trajectory and a human-like story that we can follow along with.
Yeah, I didn't even realize Francis was a pig. I think for the first 3 or 4 years of owning that album, I thought it was like a Fahrenheit 451 sort of like person running off and escaping this police state. And then once I realized what it was actually about, it hit me even harder, I think, than if I realized it at first, because I'd been seeing this person as a human being.
I won't lie, my first listen to, I fell for that. And fortunately, my spouse, when I showed her the lyrics, was like, wait, you're reading this wrong. And so I Googled around and found out about the Francis story.
So another absurdity I think Propaganda highlights here is the irony of a pet food company celebrating animals, like you said. So in his book, Eating Animals, Jonathan Safran Foer addresses the rendering of animal protein, which is unfit for human consumption, into food for livestock and pets. And he states that millions of dogs and cats are euthanized in animal shelters every year to become the food for our food. And now, from what I can tell, it doesn't seem to be that there's a ton of concrete evidence for this. Perhaps rumors that have gone around or quotes that have leaked from industry insiders. The biggest thing I've seen is like traces of drugs used to euthanize pets have been found in pet food. So do you have any thoughts on this irony or absurdity? The fact that an animal that profits off of animal suffering celebrates other animals?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, that's kind of the point of the song, right? Like, is to point out that some are honored and some are eaten. And it's interesting that it's Ralston Purina that does this, and the Canadian branch, which I actually know, unfortunately, very little about. I know much more about the St. Louis-based U.S. side of it, although it is an international company by the 60s. It was, known factories in Chile that got in trouble for managing poorly in 1970 because the socialist government in 1970 of Chile decided that, hey, maybe, you should follow rules even if you're an international company. So the company itself, though, is by the 1960s what the leader of the company at the time, the CEO, called belly to belly, animal belly to human belly company that handled cereals, but also developed feed for animals. Which is where it started. So feed for horses and mules, and eventually a major player in the feed industry for cattle and pigs and chickens, and eventually into slaughtering in the late 60s. Around the time it was honoring the food and the pet animals, it was buying turkey plants to turn them into food. It was getting into the food animal business as well. And so really what's interesting about this company we know mostly as a pet food company is it's a massive food company. And the difference between what humans eat and what animals eat, especially in the 1960s when they first launched Purina Hall of Fame, the the incidences that Chris starts the song off come from 68, are actually really thin and narrow, and surprisingly thin and narrow, to the point where in 1967, like, and I'm still developing this and working on gathering enough evidence to make this claim realistic, but for my dissertation and as I'm working on my book, it's pretty clear that the federal government's policy for emergency needs for food for people who were poor and needed meat was pet food. And this played out in this key way, and that is making food for pets inspected at the same quality that human meat is inspected. And this was thanks to a law passed in 1967. And I bring this up because it points out that the company behind all of this, a company whose profits are in the industries of feeding pets and feeding animals, and in fact slaughtering animals, who then honors pets, is engaged in an industry whose very slippery disconnects between animal and human are represented in larger transformations going on in US society at the time, and reflect a broader kind of realization that protein is protein, and animals and people will eat things that are made out of protein and can equally benefit from them. And it's this interesting moment in time when I think Purina is starting the Purina Hall of Fame and deciding what to honor, while it's also deciding what to eat.
And Chris, I know you spent a little bit of time at least browsing the Canadian Purina website, where you can find some of the honored animals. Does anything stand out from what you saw just browsing through there?
Not so much. I focused more on the first two winners, Bambi and Tippy. Bambi is the one that roused a sleeping person from bed before they burned to death, and Tippy was the one who saved a kid from drowning, which opens up the song.
Right.
And they were both in 1968. So this has been going on for a long time. So the Purina Hall of Fame's initial inductees are the start of the song, very appropriately. As of course, as a historian, I really appreciate that going down to history. No, I haven't quite gone through enough to see, when do non-dogs get honored, and the kind of animals, and like the scope and spread of the animals. In fact, this last recent round of inductees are all dogs.
Well, something else that comes to mind as you're describing some of the things that Purina has done is, I've not eaten meat for just about 11 years or so. And it's something that once I committed myself, aside from a few hiccups here or a few regrets that I had, mostly while traveling, that I've stuck to. And while I might have been pretty aggressively preachy, for a lack of a better term, early on, I've kind of just settled into my own diet, and it's something about me that I don't really try to tell other people about unless they just want to try some of my recipes. But so despite that, like, I feel like I try to do something to make an impact, but realizing how much of even my own tax dollars go in subsidies to the meat industry, like, even if I don't give my direct money at the grocery store, like my money, my income makes its way some way to these massive corporations that profit from suffering that I don't actually consume. So the absurdity there, I think, is sometimes enough to maybe feel like, not that I would give up, but it almost feels canceled out at times, given the political, the economic, and like the corporate blob that it all is.
Yeah, I mean, I chuckle because it feels so overwhelming, and there's a cosmic absurdity to the situation we find ourselves in. I think a lot of propaganda's humor, and their total overall just kind of speaks to that. And that there's, I mean, we live in a meat eating industrial society. And the truth of the matter is that economic activity is as much a product of government intervention as it is of the exchange for goods or services for money, for cash. And this is exactly what my work studies. And in fact, I would say more about the present time, but my book ends in the early to mid 1980s as I'm trying to explain why the system we have currently was set up. And I think it was definitely set up throughout the course of the 80s and a little bit before then, as different things fell into place and ultimate outcomes occurred, including ones which were exposed last March, last April, last May with COVID and meat packing plants. But we do have we are captives of the societies we live in, and it is a meat society. Non-meat options are basically have deep investments from meat companies. Meat companies are core components of massive global conglomerates that own all kinds of aspects of the food economy, and it's really hard to escape. I mean, if it was bad enough to create like the hippie commune, co-op back to nature movement of the 60s and 70s, the search for purity in food found in getting close to the soil, and farm to fork movements more recently, like it's that much worse now, where consolidation of the market has just been allowed to happen and has happened as a result, on a global scale even.
Let's talk about some of the things that COVID has highlighted then, and either on the animal or also in the human related issues of the meat industry. So I recently read that the CDC says 9% of meat packing workers have been diagnosed with COVID-19, and that last summer a report came out that said 87% of people who were infected with COVID were ethnic minorities. Do you have any other thoughts about the highlights or what was peeled back amidst the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, and I think it makes an interesting counterpoint in some ways to the song and who is implied to be the cruel meatpacking worker. Because I mean, one of the things that the song doesn't touch on is something that was definitely happening by the late 1990s, was the change of who is a meatpacking employee and what the quality of life is like to be a meatpacking employee. It was only as recently as even in the early 1980s that a meatpacking employee could expect to have enough money, a large enough salary to afford a house, afford a car, send their kids to college, do things that like defined one as a working class, blue collar, well-to-do, middle-class type person. And in that interesting post-war mix of middle-class home ownership with a blue-collar job. And by the 1990s, that was becoming increasingly impossible. And it's even worse, of course, today, as things have gotten worse in that regard. And I think that the current COVID situation reflected the fact that meat packing workers had lost a lot of their political economic power, whereas in the past they could go on strike. They would work with consumers groups. So labor groups and consumer groups were marching together against actions taken by the meatpacking industry, and could in fact do things like a humane slaughter bill, which really passed because of what it would do to workers, not so much the animals, but the logic used to justify the bill, while it was the emotional resonance of the animals being abused as part of the slaughtering process. It was really the real thing that they really moved the needle, was the fact that this was a pro-worker bill. And that just doesn't exist anymore, where the nation's consumers, which by the way we all basically are, and the nation's workers, which by the way we all basically are, could other than like, you know, a small percentage of us, could work together to cooperate in getting an agenda enacted. And I think a key component of that, and I'm not sure if it's causative yet, I don't think enough work has been done. A lot of really good sociological work has been done on meatpacking lives since the 1980s, but we're still trying. I still don't know if we know why consumers and workers started falling apart as a group that could do things like get a law passed in the wake of the jungle back in 1906. So that by the 1980s, that just wasn't happening, and continual degradation of the working environment, as you know, the horror stories that many important news organizations have thankfully uncovered, but sadly exist, including, of course, the awful betting pools, the fact that line people go to the bathroom on the line, and didn't oh yeah, that's right. As I interrupt my own thought process, I'm remembering that last week tonight, John Oliver did a piece on this issue, and it was able to show other people's work that uncovered all of these horrors, and it results in a COVID, in a situation just ripe for COVID to just destroy people's lives, which meatpacking work already did, and COVID sped it up.
Interesting. Like the law that you mentioned almost sounds like the opposite of the impact of the jungle, right? Where it was intended to be like a workers' right call to action, but it ended up almost raising people's awareness of like just what was happening within like the industry itself, specifically with animals, right?
Yeah, I mean the somewhat apocryphal saying is, I meant to hit them in the heart and I missed and hit them in the
Right.
stomach, right? Because of course you had Roosevelt pushing away a sausage and stuff like that. And it's true that meat inspection law focused most on the quality of the meat, but it gave the USDA some actual surprisingly strong powers over the working conditions, particularly things like line speeds, how the plants are laid out, things that would influence a worker's quality of life, bathroom access, sink access. All of these things were USDA controlled thanks to the Inspection Act. And those powers have increasingly been chosen to not be used by the USDA, as the consequences for refusing to look out for workers is basically no longer really a threat, because consumers will no longer not buy the meat, will not organize week-long, month-long protests against meat companies like they used to do, and or flood their lawmakers with letters asking, why aren't you create a bill, make something happen. And the result is that, I mean, we have really awful factory conditions that abuse people in order to speed up and cut costs.
Yeah. Well, another contradiction I want to ask about is celebrating animal lives that have saved a human life, but arresting and prosecuting humans who attempt to save an animal life. So, according to Will Potter, the author of Green is the New Black, the government invented the word eco-terrorist to essentially protect business interests. So, for our listeners who might not be vegetarian or vegan or have some alternative diet, why do you think people should be concerned about the expanding government powers and probes that have grown perhaps even before 9/11, but definitely since, related specifically to environmentalism and environmental activists?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that Chris offered this song when he did, because in some ways the forward momentum of animal liberation had already kind of started to peter out by the late 90s, but had also kind of become a bit mainstream in how much people were accepting on some level that it was all right to do things to free animals, with whether it's Greenpeace and their their Sea Shepherd programs, or attempts to liberate animals from awful situations, were not necessarily as verboten as they might have once been. Yet at the same time, this is right as the federal government is at the height of its war against people who are concerned with green or environmental causes, by basically just claiming that really it's all eco-terrorism. And there's some very famous cases that were really about to make their way through the criminal justice system, and were part of a broader really it's we're still there's still a lot to learn about what's going on, what's happened really since the late 1990s, but basically an all-out war on environmental activism under the guise of eco-terrorism. I mean, it's not surprising that in 2008 the FBI had called basically eco-terrorists like the really like the biggest terrorist threat, the biggest domestic terrorist threat the United States faces.
It's so crazy to think about what's happened within the last 4 or 5 years, and that shift and the domestic terrorists that pose actual threats in the United States, and the language from a decade ago. That blows my mind.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing that there are people who have worked on it. The historian Ryan Shapiro did similar work. I mean, it was not quite on animal industries, but it was on experimentation. And as it was, because his work had so much government sources to go after and they were so hard to get, he became a Freedom of Information Act requesting like a guru, to the point where he basically is, if he's not the single most, if he didn't make the single most Freedom of Information Act requests in history, he's come pretty close to it. And it's a stunning revelation as to what the federal government's criminal justice system leadership cared about. The people in charge, particularly the FBI, that they saw animal liberation and general earth focused groups as being, just like such an important terrorist threat, to the point where, other than international terrorism connected to 9/11, when it came to domestic side stuff, it was just trying to root out all the so-called eco-terrorists. And of course, while that was going on, anti-terrorist actions against the right quickly, what little existed in the wake of the Timothy McVeigh explosions and some stuff done in the 1980s, was quickly dropped and made even more untouchable by like 2010. And fears of animal liberation groups still pervade media and our framework. I mean, I think just like every single animal disease outbreak zombie movie requires Earth liberationists to do something stupid, let alone the fact that Earth liberationists have usually been described right after the fact, like, oh yeah, maybe you shouldn't strap animals to like a gurney and like, shove medicine in their eyes, or maybe you should develop techniques in a slaughterhouse that minimize at least the pain before death. And maybe they're right, while of course the media image of an animal rights activist is someone who's goofy and out of touch and stuffed full with their own kind of importance that they don't understand how the real world works.
Yeah, 28 Days Later comes to mind. It's basically their fault. They start off the movie, never mind the company that is weaponizing anger, but they're the ones who unleash it. Well, I want to jump to an idea then related to this idea of eco-terrorism, with the lyrics, a package under a terminal bench and a short fuse to scatter, steady hands to forget, if I forget to remember. How do you see this last part as someone's watching, patient, unattended, watching the box cars go by? How do you interpret or vision that part that comes close to closing the song?
Yeah, this is the part that definitely kind of like lands the emotional rock, or the emotional kind of rough beginning, where you're hit with this animal abuse and a lyrical, like a group, a set of lyrics that even to this very day, I'm learning more about it. It starts off with literal Purina Hall of Fame winners, which I didn't realize was quite going on. And then it ends with something that kind of reminds me of their previous song, similar to his comments in Resisting Tyrannical Government, where he talks about the call to violence, the spur to violence, riding their bikes and blowing things up, would not serve the interests at heart.
Yeah.
And would be used to justify further violent responses. And it's kind of like in a weird way, the curse of being a person in a comfortable position, grappling with the moral elements of terrorism and violence to achieve one's goals, going through the thought process of connecting dots as to what would be achieved and what would be the consequences. And I see in this, honestly, because I watched it at a young age. This song, when I think about that particular image with the train yards, I honestly think of Red Dawn's raid on the train yards and the kind of violent masculine imagery that, for me, I conjure up when I think about planning a secret bomb and trying to undo an unjust system. Again, a product of the mid 80s that certainly explains part of the connection. And that's kind of what I think of visually when I think of the lyrics, and I have since, I think, the get-go. But I also grapple really a lot with and really find compelling what he says after. And for me, that's the heart of the song, when he says that it's better lives have been lived in the margins, locked in the prisons, and lost in the gallows than have ever been enshrined in palaces. Because for me, this connects who are the song to itself and what he's saying. Because after all, who in this song context are locked in the margins, lived in the margins, locked in the prisons, and lost in the gallows? Well, it's the meat animals. And who's enshrined in palaces? Well, it's the dogs. It's the animals that rescued. It's animals that rescued their owners. It's Bambi Tippy from 1968.
Chris, that's such a great connection. I never really made a line between the end of Purina and the boxcars and the package under the bench with resisting tyrannical government. And it almost seems like this, I'm not going to do that and I'm not going to support it, but I can fantasize about what it would be like if I, blew up this factory, or if I engage in this widespread violence in some way.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really love about Zoochosis, is it's like a closure of this experience where he can envision a world where he plays a part in using violence to liberate, ultimately doesn't, but can envision those who did, Francis escaping from his fate for a couple months running wild in the hinterlands of Canada, and then realizing as he's an adult that he didn't resist, that he did enjoy what he had, and to still kind of go out fantasizing, using his teeth that he never really used before, that have gone to waste, as he envisions his sons escaping that kind of fate.
Well, Chris, what about the final whispered lyrics? They read, "It's not your fault. There's nothing that you can do. It's just the way it is. There's nothing we can do." And I read this like I do some of the lines in Last Will and Testament, where Chris Hannah sings, "We're powerless to change anything anyway." Like, I don't take it on face value, because the music that comes just after that statement, I think it's clear that it betrays that sense of hopelessness in the lyrics. So how can we change some of the things that we've talked about today as individuals, as states, as nations, like as communities, or maybe even just how can we, or maybe even more simply, can we change those things?
Yeah, that's the stunning question. I mean, that's kind of defines Propagandi's whole musical approach, right? Is grappling with these, being an individual while also acknowledging greater forces than yourself, and wondering, as historians are wont to ask, is there a role of the individual in making history, or are we trapped in societies and forces greater than our own choice. Coming to Marx's dictum that, and this is a malappropriation of what he said, but humans make history, but not in the circumstances of their choosing. It's much more poetic the way he said it, but that's the gist of it. And I think this is grappling with that. And I find a heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching joy in giving into those thoughts and processing the fact that my own and individual dietary choices really don't matter, but they are my choices and they matter to me.
Yeah, right on.
And there's that duality where individual action matters, but it's not that which topples the system or changes the system, really. And I think that's to kind of maybe conclude a bit more with the previous discussion we had on violence. Like, it's not leaving a bomb inside of a bus, inside of a train depot that's going to change the world. Now, of course, for my own research, I think it's organized activity that does it. I mean, the fact that consumers and workers in the past have transformed meat, granted, this is to make more accessible and available. But, when you've got a kid and, you want to make sure your kid grows up strapping and young and strong, or to have the right kind of nutrients, and you think only meat can provide it for you, it makes sense that people, moved heaven and earth to make meat happen. But there's no reason why similar organized activity couldn't be redone, and in a way that might challenge the way the current industry looks, who has power, who doesn't, who benefits, who doesn't, as the questions about the sustainability of the meat production system itself is called into question, let alone the cruelty at the heart of it. That there is, there are moments of inflection, there are moments of choice. But of course, they're not individual choice per se, but the cumulative amount of choices coming together that change things.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy to feel like the tank man, right? Not to say myself as any sort of victim or oppressed of or susceptible to violence in any way. I am not, but it's easy to just feel like it is one person against the system, and then maybe forgetting the people that I encounter who maybe share some similar views about meat than I do, and kind of hold on to those smaller moments that maybe make more of a human connection, even if like the bigger picture itself seems like it's overwhelming and not easy to change.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, as far as individual effort goes, I mean, there's a reason why meat industry basically invested in, became venture capitalists to invigorate the non-meat industry. It's because, in the 2010s, it became good business to do so.
Well, Chris, do you have any other thoughts about the lyrics in Purina or the music or anything else regarding the song?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big emotional song, and I always enjoy capping off the Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes with it. The frenzied outro is a
Right.
brilliant way to finish what starts off with an otherwise unlistenable to audio clip, and ends with that heartbeat thumping out, connecting us to the beginning of the song and giving a good way to kind of like, close out what is a banger of a song.
It seems like while Refusing to Be a Man is incredible and it's melodic, and I think it's easily one of the best songs on Less Talk, with Today's Empires and Purina, this seems like the first real example where they're going all out on the last track with the lyrics, with the ideas, with the musical message, to make one final impression before things wrap up. And it seems like it kind of starts here. And then after this, like, they just continue.
With iteration, it kind of hit home that this was going to be the way it was, and then all the way through to Zoochosis, they just lived up to it. Where the concluding track just melts the face and lands the album in a way that's just it moves.
Well, Chris, thank you for talking with me today about Purina Hall of Fame. We look forward to hearing more about your book. I know it's still in the process. We'll be sure to share with our readers once it's out. And, we're always excited to have you on to hear your thoughts as a fan, as a historian, as a member who of this society is also trying to figure out these sometimes unanswerable questions. So we're glad to be on the ride with you.
Thank you very much for having me. Look forward to listening to your future episodes and joining When Asked.
Well, Keith, that was a fabulous chat with Chris Deutsch. People may have picked up the other day on Twitter whenever you posted something along the lines of me whenever Greg says I did a good interview with a Bugs Bunny meme walking around flexing his muscles. That is the exact one that I was thinking of. So I hope people loved it as much as I did, because I truly did love it. And gosh, I'm so glad that Chris likes us and enjoys coming on the show. I love how you guys talked about the plot connection between Purina and Potemkin City Limits.
Right.
The story of Francis. Like, I just absolutely loved what you guys chatted about. It was just such a wonderful conversation.
Well, let's jump ahead to our next interview. Greg, who did you talk to for Purina?
Well, I went ahead and invited Sulynn Hago to join us again. A guitar song like Purina Hall of Fame needed a guitarist's perspective, I felt. The reason I hit up Sulynn is because of their fantastic Propaganda online guitar lesson they did this summer and fall. Anybody might remember Sulynn's Propaganda series masterclasses, where they talked about Without Love, Night Letters, Purina Hall of Fame, some of these fabulous guitar tunes that Propaganda is so well known for. And many people took individualized guitar lessons with Sulynn, learning Propaganda songs. So instead of picking Sulynn's brain on the lyrical content of this song, we talked about the guitar playing on this one specifically. So this is a conversation specifically about guitar, but seeing as I am a totally pathetic guitar player, we talked about this in a very digestible style that even people who aren't guitarists, I think, can appreciate. So seeing as how this is often seen as the guitar song in Propaganda's discography due to the phenomenal riffs and the solo, I felt it was appropriate. So Sulynn jumped on the phone with me for half an hour to chat Purina guitar. So leading us into this interview with Sulynn is a rendition of Purina Hall of Fame performed by someone I found on YouTube named Nick Orr. And I felt that Nick's style of covering Purina was really cool. And I asked Nick if it was okay if I put this song in the episode. So leading us into my interview with Sulynn, here is Nick Orr's rendition of Purina Hall of Fame. So enjoy my chat with Sulynn.
Plaques and soft soaps are the ephemeral rewards paid to slaves whose selfless acts accord. A higher value to their masters. These parting gifts, gold pistols, console the rest and await the remainder. And too bad the tribute's paid to lives that relegate these thrones, to lives spent valuing the runners up are known to be neither fleeting nor desirable. Nothing surprises me these days. I just sit and watch the boxcars roll by and wait. So patient, so unattended. terminal bench end. Short fuse to scatter, steady hands forget to remember the better lives have.
Hey, Sulynn, thanks for joining me to take a musical tour of the song Purina Hall of Fame.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's cool.
Yeah, right on. So, Sulynn, I'm curious about your earliest memories of hearing this incredible song. Tell me about like what you remember about hearing Purina for maybe the first couple of times.
I kind of don't remember.
Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird with today's empires. Like, it was such a monumental record for me, but for whatever reason, it's like a hole in my memory. Maybe, I don't know. But it's like there's like shimmers of like just hearing, I'd say, the like beginning riff and maybe the solo, like from what I do remember. And I just thought it was a great beating.
Yeah.
Like it just seemed like it went on this kind of roller coaster ride of like starting strong. You know, it's like the last song on the record, and then just ending the record on this like fucking insane solo, this instrumental part, and then I call it the 80s fade. I love that.
Do you think that the reason you don't have any memories of it as much is because it is the last song in the record? Like, it's not Today's Empires. It's not, Mata Kamari Sakun Rasakan. It's not Back to the Motor League. It's not those early tracks on side A. Do you think that being at the end has something to do with it?
Yeah, it could. That's a good point. I've never thought about that, and I haven't really thought about why. I can't remember it. Yeah.
Okay, so
potentially.
So tell me this. Every Propaganda fan wants to hear this song live. Literally all of us, right? We go to a show, we want to see this song, and you don't always get it, which is totally awesome in my opinion.
Yeah.
Tell me about the band deciding if they're going to include this. Tell me about the rehearsal process, anything that springs to mind about like having this song included in the live set.
You know, it's funny, like our live set, I guess like compiling the songs is like a lot less like kind of laid back than you would think. It's like an idea popped in someone's mind, like, hey, maybe we should play this one this time. All right, cool.
That's so perfect.
It's very much like, oh, we haven't played this one in a while, so maybe we should now. So yeah, that's about the extent of picking a set list. Like, oh, that one's fun. We should do that. Okay. And then rehearsing it, it's just everyone relearns it and just shows up in the room and just tightens it up again, which is the beauty of like playing with such amazing musicians, like just being able to fucking do that. And especially with so many songs that have insane parts. Like, I love that part about like showing up and like, the first days it was rusty. It's like everyone kind of getting back into it. Like even like just a new song that hasn't been played in a little bit. A new song for the set, meaning. And yeah, it's just cool to see it come alive already, like within like a day.
Yeah,
it's pretty fucking awesome. It's one of my favorite things about like the practice weeks.
So this song on the record is super fast, possibly the fastest Propaganda song. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe Bullshit Politicians with those blast beats, or Night Letters as well. But I'm curious, like, when you play this live, do you feel like it's hitting that same pace that is on the record, or have you found a sort of like a more medium middle ground to for performing it?
No, I think it's like when we haven't played it actually in a few years. I'd say like either 2 or 3 years. But while playing it, it feels like it's like when you jump in, you're in, and it's just like kind of grabs hold of your collar, and there's nowhere to go. So yeah, I think it still has the power, and just because it's like part after part, it's just a continuous like momentum building, and what's coming. It's like that solo is coming and that ending.
Oh my god,
that build up.
Yeah. Whenever you do put this in a set, has this always been last, or have you put it elsewhere?
man, it's been too long for me to remember that detail. Like it really has been, I'd say like even 3 years, even 4 years. I'd have to kind of look back because even for this master class I'm doing, I'm like, I have to relearn this song myself. Like I don't remember how to, like I remember glimpses of it, but it's been, yeah, I don't remember where we put it, honestly.
Holy smokes.
It might have been closer to the end before all the other tunings. And I think, hold on, oh yeah, I don't think we fucking played this since, it was like before Victory Lap was out. We did not play this on any of the tours after Victory Lap was out.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure of that. So yeah, it's been a minute.
You know what's really cool about Propaganda, and this is a total side note, but like whenever I saw Propaganda for Failed States, that tour, I was like, holy cow, they played like 8 songs from the new record on that tour. You know what I mean? Like you are not a band that goes out and relies on the old hits. Like I've seen other Fat Wreck bands from like the 90s who are going out and still playing their 96 and 98 release and then playing 2 songs off the new record. And I'm like, come on, I want to see the new songs. Do you know what I mean? Like you guys, you aren't like that as a band.
Oh, not at all. I mean, even our first show, Victory Lap, which I still consider one of the hardest shows I've ever played. So it was like in Winnipeg. It was like, we were just, it might have been the Victory Lap release show. Yeah. Yeah. I was like playing, I think 8 songs off Victory Lap at this show. And like, what was cool about that too, is like, it was the first time, like, I felt like we were all on the same page in terms of like, oh, I'm not the only one that this is the first time playing this song in front of people. It's like, it's finally like the entire band. And so like, the intensity was there. Actually, George's sister told me after the show, she's like, wow, she's like, it was very quiet on stage. She's like, it kind of had this intense vibe. And, you know, we're playing also to a room with like all their family and friends. Yeah. And then the hometown stuff, you know, so it's like, so yeah, to this day, that was, I would say, might even have been harder than the first show, which is crazy. But it, you know, I love that about it, because when you do it and then it went really well. It's also one of my favorite shows I've ever played. You just feel like champs. You're like, we fucking did the thing that's hard to do. And you know, it's not necessarily the people pleaser. And you do it anyway because you're like, these are new songs and these messages are, you know, the content and the music is a reflection of who the people are currently. So like, this is who we are and this is what we're putting out. You know?
I love it. Well, okay, so let's get into Purina a little bit. So you've been writing and transcribing this tune in preparation for an upcoming Propaganda guitar masterclass, which will be long since aired by the time this conversation is aired. But I wanted to interview you for this tune now, while this song and the transcription are like fresh in your head. So I want to go on like a guitar tour of this song. Can you tell me a little bit about the distinct parts about how this song progresses from the beginning sort of to the end?
Well, the beginning's like already a beating, and I think like rhythmically, those 3 chords of that, they come in also not in a predictable way. Like they're not like rhythmically, they kind of sit in some weird spots. Like if I were to get nerdy, it's like what I think dotted quarter, you know, but like it has a bit of a syncopated vibe, but still kind of a bit of a very attacking vibe. And then just how melodic all of the parts are. You know, it's the perfect blend of being like this, like it's almost not too chuggy, like in the way that like a lot of like maybe Propaganda songs are. And by chuggy meaning like a lot of low string palm muted kind of stuff. But I think rhythmically and even how all the leads, how they are delivered rhythmically, make the song like this roller coaster ride. What I like about the beginnings, the riffs, is it feels like a conversation between the 2 kinds of riffs. Like the first, you know, talker would be like that, and then the second talker would be like that, na. It almost feels like a response, you know. And I love that kind of stuff because it's like, you know, especially then it was like 3-piece, and it's a cool way to create almost like the sense of 2 guitars, like a call and response. And it's a great song in that sense. And then I like the kind of like when it goes a little slower and just the melodic lines again, they're just like it's very like arpeggio based, just like chords and just a lot of right hand moving around, kind of mapping out nice melodic lines along these really cool chord changes. Yeah. And I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, there's the part right before. I think it's right before the solo. Yeah, the
Yes.
the build up thing. Fuck, that is one of the best parts. I love that part. Again, it's just three
What's happening
notes.
there?
I'm trying to think of if I'm not mistaken, because I'm still kind of mapping it out, and I don't know
Sure.
if I haven't actually gotten to tabbing that, even though I've played it. I'm pretty sure it's I'm not mistaken, it's like a B, C sharp, and D note. Those are considered like 9 chords. So basically like that's the name of the chord, like a 9 chord.
Mm.
So another popular 9 chord is like, think of like the Police, the beginning, the opening.
Mm.
So yeah, it just has to do with like certain note mixtures and things like that. It just creates an interval of a 9. And there's something about that sound I know for myself, and actually Propaganda like loves this and does it a lot too. You see it in Coaches, you see it in Potemkin, like it's all over a lot of like Propaganda songs. But I love the sounds of those chords because it does kind of have like that kind of 80s sound, but it also has like a darker sound to it. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's in terms of like the actual chord makeup, like that chord is so satisfying to me, like a harmony standpoint, and just rhythmically, just the groups of 3, the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and just
Yes.
building up is so awesome, and the drums starting to become like very like ornamental. I love that.
Yeah.
So good. I love when things are like, because that song, I'll say it's simple, but it's, I don't know how to say this. Like it's just clever. Like it's like, it's not. Again, I don't want to say it's not too fancy because it's like that's even subjective. But I just find it's just like, it just feels classy.
Mm.
Like, I don't know what I'm talking about now. I don't know how to describe it, but it just feels like maybe when I teach people, like, oh, it's just a lot of like these chords are kind of like almost like power chords, but like with an extra little bit of style, like kind of different voicings and stuff like that. It's so great.
Do you think that there's like almost like a trick it played on the listener? Is it actually easier than it sounds in a lot of parts? Because it sounds crazy hard.
Yeah, I just yeah, it might be. I think I'm trying to think of why that is. I think it's just so driving, and because it's very linear. It's like kind of, I mean, there's like a couple of things that repeat themselves, but it's like each riff that happens after each other, you almost forget about the previous one because you get just sucked into the current one.
Mm.
But they're not that different from each other in terms of maybe like chord voicings. Like everything feels very cohesive in that sense. But like I said, I think it's sometimes the rhythmic delivery just kind of almost like you have amnesia. You're like, wow, this riff is the best. And then you get to the next one and you're like, oh, this one's the best.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I love about, like, and that's even live is something that's enjoyable about songs like this, is that like you're kind, you're playing and then you kind of think of like your next step because you obviously gotta like change chords or whatever. And then you get excited. It's like, oh yeah, this part's going. This is gonna be great.
Mm.
I have those moments with a lot of Propaganda songs, actually.
Awesome. Do you have like a favorite specific part of this song that you find most satisfying?
I'd say I like the beginning because again, I think another one is like just the combination of like the strumming, like the kind of very like beating kind of strumming,
Yeah.
very downstroke, like bah, 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 very hard kind of hitting things.
Yeah.
That with a combination of just bouncing out of that to like a more melodic delivery, I just love that combination because it's what I want. It's like it's everything I want to do on the guitar. It's like, yeah, I'll be kind of more of a lead player, but I also want to like beat the shit out of the thing too.
Hell
and it's
yeah.
just like, so I know the opening I like a lot too, and actually the part where it kind of breaks down a bit. I'm gonna sing it. It's the like
Yeah.
that part. And I remember I played that part live, and it actually had a little chorus on it, which was like a nice touch. It made it sound like a little like blossom a little bit differently than on the recording. Kind of gave it a little bit more of like an 80s sound, and I loved how that sounded. But just how that, because you were going so like heavy driving for so much of the song, and then you arrive there, it's like a breath of like fresh air. And just even it's just nice chord voice. It's a nice melodic line, and just going between really cool sounding chord. It's just satisfying with the right hand too. It's this nice melodic thing. What's funny is even that's the one part that I remember the most in terms of even the whole song. Like, again, it's been years since we've played it, but I would catch myself sometimes picking up the guitar even to warm up with that.
Oh, nice.
Because I love it. It's so good. It's so nice.
Well, and then of course the solo, which blew everybody's mind when it came out, and it still holds up completely. What in the world is going on with this solo? This thing is so unreal.
It's just like the licks are just chaotic, it's just like I almost think like the beginning of the track that's like with the cows and shit, like it's almost like has a weird parallel where the fucking solo is just like yelling. It's just yelling at you. It's almost like it's calling out itself. It's like, and especially with the content, just the frustration, it's just like, it just feels like it has that kind of like spirit of like, fuck it.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But yeah, so in terms of tech, just your fucking rock and roll solo, it's just doing some nice like double stop bends and some amazing like kind of triplet type of like these really fast like single string shreddy lines that you really just really fucking fast. That's what it comes down to, and just syncing up your hands to fucking getting an actual sequence of 3 notes to be heard, not just like falling apart. And then what's great about it too, and you probably feel the same, so I love that it kind of goes shreddy. It does like the bends, and then it does that kind of like single string really like a speed picking thing. Yeah. And then it does the fucking I don't know if the order's right, but at some point it breaks away from like your typical like soloing kind of thing, and it does the chords. Okay, the chords are just like fucking awesome. Like that to me is just like, that's how you write a solo. It's like you fucking take it where you didn't think it was going to go.
Yeah. Okay. So Sulynn, I got to talk to you about that, because my favorite part of the solo is after the initial super shreddy part. And then from 3 minutes and 49 seconds to 4 minutes, it goes, and then it builds up, and then it builds up to that crescendo where it shreds again. That is absolute insanity. That is my favorite part of the solo, where it builds back up. Blew me away.
It's so awesome, because it's like, again, it's not what you think the solo should do. Yeah. Because you feel like, hey, you started a solo, stick with like solo, and it's like, it's interesting because to me it almost it's almost like Chris becomes a rhythm guitar player in that part for a second. And I love that, because it's like it's creating such like nice use of space, like where sometimes with solos it can just feel like overkill, like like the shredding's happening so much, just pulls you back. And then with the crescendo, that's just like a little like, I think like a C sharp minor, like scale run. Or no, we harmonized, so that's from my perspective. Also live, so Chris does it up in I think on the B string, like high E. He does like this kind of it's like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, like it kind of moves in that sequence up, like these scale tones. He's going on a single string up the B string, and then when I played it live, I actually played it in one position, but we were harmonizing that, which is pretty fucking cool to do live. I remember that being really hard.
Oh my God.
And just being like, fuck, because it's like, you just have to be in the pocket, and it was just like, that was fun. Doing that live.
Do you guys ever like look at each other after a song, and like any song, and be like, holy smokes, we nailed that?
Probably.
Oh my God. Cause
I
I'm just picturing these like these moments of like sheer like perfection, satisfaction of completely nailing something and being like, oh yeah, we smoked that one.
Well, I think the most recent memories of us looking at each other was like more like, oh fuck, I was playing the wrong thing at practice, like, and then like, Chris informs me of like, no, it's actually this note or something like that, and I'm like, fuck, it's like we're going on live in a few hours, like it's not in my muscle memory. So there's a lot of those moments of like, lucky for me, and knock on whatever is around, knock on wood, that like, I luckily nailed them live, but it was a very hyper focus, like, all right, it's not what you've been playing for like a few months, it's actually this, and you gotta do it live where it counts, like once.
Yeah.
So, and then like when it happens and it happens right, you see like there's like this kind of smirk side glance, like, yeah, it happened.
Oh my God.
It happened. It went well. Like there's been like, I think within the last year, I think 3 occurrences of that. Like, and that's part of the the beauty, if you want to call it, of being a long distance band, is like, I'm just kind of, sometimes I get videos of Chris playing the songs and I just learn them like that. Like a lot of times there's not tabs or anything, and like for the older stuff, and then just if my ear heard something different or I saw something different, like I could be learning it wrong, and then I go up that week and it's just like I have to unlearn kind of what I already had been practicing. So we figure it out though.
Awesome.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, I think there are I think there are moments where it's just like, especially when it's a song that we're kind of throwing into the set again. Actually, Tertium was one of those, and it goes well. You just feel proud, like, fuck yeah.
Oh man. And because Tertium is such, and we talked about that before, that song is riff after riff after riff, and that's a super hard song too. So I put like Purina and like Tertium, like I put these kinds of songs like sort of like in the same like stratospheric category for the band, where it's like these ones are like the special batch.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes me happy. It makes all of us happy.
Cool.
Like it makes fans happy. It makes, hopefully makes you all happy too. It's just so cool. Oh, all right. Well, Sulynn, I am super stoked on your masterclass series that you've been doing. I'm really glad that you want to take this chance to sort of like verbalize what is going on in Purina Hall of Fame guitar wise. So like, maybe you can have some ideas for talking to your own students who sign up for the masterclass about this song and why it's so satisfying to you as a player and a member of the band. It's just awesome to hear your thoughts and ideas as you're putting together these charts and these tabs, so that you can, teach all the people who are taking this class a little clearly about what is happening in this song.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. It definitely helps to kind of spring the life into it before this thing happens, and I'll have to kind of project that over to the people wanting to learn it. People are stoked, it's like, it's also one of this, like this song, part of why I'm like tabbing it is like, it's a song that doesn't have a book, like from an album that doesn't have a transcription book out yet. I'm sure it'll maybe happen one of these days. It's funny, I had text Chris like actually it was the same video shot that I sent you of the guitar profile where like the beginning's playing. I was like, this is pretty fucking cool to see, like, to hear what you're doing, like even to map out the rhythms, because usually I just go by ear and like I'm not really paying attention to like, hey, that's a dotted quarter and all this bullshit. I just kind of go by ear and feel, and just to kind of actually see it on the page and map it out. And I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
You write some pretty fucking good songs.
Nice. Yes. Well, it's also fantastic to hear the technical side of it. Like whenever you talk about like the musical structure and theory behind it, it just elevates conversations like this to another level. And I know the listeners absolutely love hearing stuff like that because it makes the listening experience for this show a little special for them as well. So thank you so much for your technical breakdowns as well, because that just makes this even better,
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed this stuff, so thanks for having me, and it's a cool bit to include and to talk about.
On the tangent.
All right. So thank you so much again to our fantastic guests, Dr. Chris Deutsch and Sulynn Hago. What a fabulous, fabulous event to have two return guests on such a fantastic song. Our tremendous gratitude to both of them. So, Keith, why don't we go ahead and start with the music on Purina Hall of Fame? What do you think?
Yeah, Greg, I think that going back to that Patreon episode, Chris talks about Today's Empires as the album in which the band began to just speed things up until it felt out of control,
Mhm.
and then felt like that was what they were striving for, or at least Chris and Todd, not so much Jord.
Poor Jord.
But above the band's facilities and abilities, their capacities, he makes it seem like. And that's such a sharp contrast, I think, to the tone and the style on Less Talk. And I hear the screws like coming loose. If this is a car going down the road, the screws, the lug nuts are coming loose. That I hear way more on Mateka, the first song, and here on the last song. I think it's really apparent on the bookends in this album.
I agree. The opening soundscape of the sow being beaten and thrashed shows what a bunch of sick, twisted freaks humans can be. You know what I mean? So for me, that's like the tone on the bookends of this album as well. So you think about like the genocide of people upon people depicted within Mate Ka, and then you think about the genocide of people upon non-human animals in the closing song, and it's like we have this like bookends of death in this record, bookends of killing. And it's a really, really jarring introduction and outro to this record, because both of those thinks about the way that humans treat people, and then you go through the middle part of the record, and then you go out thinking about how do we treat all non-human animals on this earth. And like these two bookends, I mean, this is like just an intro and outro of death on this record. And, every time I hear that intro with the man screaming at the pig, I think of how many people in the world would behave in exactly the same way as the person who's doing the beating on the recording. How many people on this planet have the ability to inflict that specific brand of cruelty? It must be so many more people than we can possibly realize would be perfectly fine with being the person screaming, get up, and, beating that pig in the audio. I think it would scare me a little too much to know how many people would actually be capable of that kind of behavior that we hear on the intro to the song. 'Cause it's probably a lot more than we think.
Yeah, Greg, something you said about something that people are capable of. And of course, I don't think it being intentional with the band, but just contrasting the cruelty of the intro with the just utter wonderful and beautiful and inspiring composition of the song that follows, the other things that humans are capable of, that maybe we need to spend more time in those positive and constructive things that don't come at the harm of others.
Yeah. It's very jarring, and I'm having trouble getting my bearings because of just how challenging it is to think about the heartbeat in the beginning of the song, and to think about the connection that all how many the living beings of Earth have hearts, and the heart that you hear beating in the beginning of the song doesn't really even have to be species specific. It can just symbolize a heart, a life of a living being on this planet. And, I know that animal hearts beat at different cadences and rhythms based on the species. And, different animals have different heart rates, etc. So the heart does sound extremely human. But, and I haven't researched this, but I would be curious to see how many animals in the world how many species have similar heart rates to human beings. And seeing if you put a stethoscope up to a heart of tons and tons of different species, how many would be indecipherable from listening to a human heart? Do you know what I mean? It's got to be possible that some hearts would sound exactly like ours if a doctor was pressing a stethoscope against a body. So that's what I think about whenever I hear the beginning of this song. The the heartbeat of living beings and then transitions into the beating and the thrashing. It's like in Zoocosis as well, another closer that has the children playing into Donald Trump talking about molesting women.
Yeah.
Right. So they've got these little nuggets in their closing tracks where it starts off with something that binds humans, the heartbeat, the children playing, and then it goes into something horrible, the beating of the pig, Donald Trump talking about building a wall to separate human beings from other human beings. And I'm like, oh my God, these closing tracks are just so heavy and they make me so sad, but I can't turn away. It's one of those things where I just can't stop, you know?
Yeah. And the fact that you said it's life and it doesn't really matter what kind of life, that is so important, because this song, for a lack of a better terms, like musically, it is just life. It is so energetic, right? It is so spirited, and to talk about, right, that they're sped up beyond what a person can actually play. But then if you watch from the last few years, Propaganda play this live, and you see them play it live, and you're like, how the hell are they able to do that?
Yeah, they nail it.
Yeah, it's so sped up, and I don't mean that as a criticism. It's just has this panicked and distressed, but also tight and controlled feel to it. And that is so unique to this album. And I don't really think the band has that sound after this, but I don't think they really strive for that sound after this.
Yeah, this is a really, like, there are some songs on Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes that are very standalone in sound throughout the discography of this band. You have a lot of Todd and Chris songs where they sing it together, which is pretty unique to this record. They have songs that are this fast, which are pretty rare from here on out. But, you know, I was thinking about this, what you said earlier about Todd and Chris speeding things up almost inhumanly. Poor Jord, right? Like, the drumming on this song is so unbelievably fast. Chris has a rough mix cassette from their first couple of recording sessions for Empires that he posted on his Patreon. So there is another version of Purina that Chris posted on at the end of his Purina episode, where the drums sound so good, so different than the edited drum versions that made it onto the record. I can hear every cymbal hit crystal clear. The drums sound far more like a real kit. It's almost like if you put the drum recording of Failed States onto the recording of Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. Because if you listen to the album version of Empires versus Failed States, the drums could not sound more different, right? There's so much more drum editing on Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes versus Failed States. And it's the difference of like the way that JP and Ryan made the records. But the recording is so cool because you can hear Jord so well on the rough mix version. And also the guitar solo is entirely absent from the entire outro on the rough mix version because they hadn't done the guitar solo yet whenever they made it. So the drums are so awesome, and it made me appreciate the recordings of the drums on Supporting Cast by Jason Livermore and Bill Stevenson, Failed States and Victory Lap by JP Peters, so much more, because I really like the style of recording that the drums feature on those other records as compared to today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. But Jord is cracking me up on this song. Like, you listen to it and it's like, how? Why?
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? And I feel bad for the guy, but it's like, as a fan, I'm so glad that Todd and Chris were as demented as they were when recording this album.
Yeah.
Because it's like hilariously good and like comedically fast. But the break in the beat under the line "to burning homes from beds," he goes bop 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 on the drums. So he's going that crazy fast pace, And then he goes to burning homes from beds, and the drums go bop, 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 bop. So the drums match that sung line, and he does it under the ephemeral rewards, bop, 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 bop. And it makes the crushing pace of the song so much more interesting. But I absolutely love the drumming on this song. And, the guitars that you were mentioning, this is a song that I feel almost any guitarist in punk rock, or maybe even, other forms of heavy music, wishes that they had written. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you hear a song when you're like a songwriter and you're like, man, I wish I wrote that song. I feel like anybody would be so proud to have written this song. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely transcends genres in a really unique way.
Yeah, and Chris is so interesting on this song because there are parts where he's like, just like these big open drums where it's almost like very minimal playing, but Todd is giving her under those parts where Chris is just doing those big open strums. Todd is just going at it just so fast under that part. And so Chris is like almost barely playing on parts and Todd is trucking. The bass lick under the unattended line is also so cool. Where's do 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 do.
Right.
And it's like it's noodly, it's nifty. I love what Todd did there, and it kind of previews how Todd would grow as a bassist because like I feel like that is a part that really stands out on this record bass-wise. For the entire record, but Todd does that on the rest of the records so well, where out of nowhere you'll have this little bass line, this little solo of bass that just comes through in just these little tiny flares. And that is what I love so much about Todd, is that when he comes through in those little flares, I'm like, oh, there it is. I love it. And I love the way the riff builds underneath the Better Lives Have Been Lost on the Gallows part, that it has that big open strums, but then it has pieces of the part that kick in fully after There's Nothing We Can Do.
Right.
So it previews that dun 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 under the section that came before. So every now and then this line will come through that the last vocal line, just like Lost in the Prisons, where it goes dun 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 dun, and you'll hear that little marchy riff coming through, and then Chris whispers, "There's nothing we can do," and then it goes into that line fully. So I love the way they previewed that little march riff in the part before that. But Chris has this like awesome playthrough video of this song that he did for all the riffs, the 7 main rhythm riffs that make up the song, on Patreon, and it's just so cool, man. There's just so many guitar riffs on this song, and I don't know, find me a more jaw-dropping guitar solo in all of punk rock than this solo. Tremolo picking, bends, triplets, 24 frets of guitar shredding. I just love how Chris said the solo didn't take very long to come together as well. Like, I guess that's like how so many people say the best things just fall out of them. And the riff under the solo is so freaking rad. Like the rough mix that Chris put on Patreon doesn't have a solo. And I'm like, this is still completely awesome. So I just love the way this song is put together guitar wise. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a total classic.
Greg, everything that you mentioned shows how this is ushering in like the band's tendency to end the record with just an epic scorcher, right? There is a blazing solo, there's frantic speeds, soaring and impassioned vocals, there are technical and melodic riffs, the drums that are equally technical and emotive and high speed. And it's funny, like looking at all the comments regarding this, of course, most of them are typically about, if it's about the music, it's about the solo. But for me, I don't listen to and I don't pay attention a lot to solos really. For the most part, I think they can lack, I don't know, maybe depth. And I don't mean emotionally, or I mean emotionally. I don't really mean like technically or musically. I don't think it always captures for me what a song might be striving to say, what its message might be, what the purpose might be. But this one is so perfectly in sync with everything else that fits in the song. And by itself, it's just really, really good.
Yeah.
Like it also just happens to be just an amazing solo in addition to everything else in the song working so well.
And you know what's interesting is like my favorite part of the solo isn't the twiddly bits. It's the part that goes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's the part that makes the hair on my arm stand up when I'm driving in the car with this album on full volume. That's my favorite part of this solo. It's not the wild stuff. Let's talk about the lyrics. What do you think? Let's move on.
All right, Greg. I feel a lot of pressure for this.
Yeah, me too. So I have some opening thoughts on the big picture meaning of this song. This is a song to me that is about mercy, about empathy, about looking away from catastrophe and talking in whitewashed euphemism over the outright cruelty that happens under our noses each day with our support, with our money. A comment on YouTube caught my eye and it said, I wonder what goes on in the mind of people that do these things. There's a certain kind of person in this world, one might picture a Donald Rumsfeld character, as Chris alludes to in his Patreon, who has the innate ability to just either look away or to just not care about pain that is inflicted on other living creatures, human or otherwise. I spoke a lot about workers in animal processing plants on a previous episode, and I am not at all saying that people who work in animal processing facilities are all evil. So I just want to clarify that, I'm not saying that if you work in an animal processing plant, you are evil, right? I'm not saying that if you are a farmer or have farmed and one of the livestock, one of your products is livestock, that you are evil. I'm not saying that at all. The depiction of the audio recording of the worker at the beginning of this song is, I would like to believe, a very, significant, a very specific portion of people who do work like this, but many people who work in animal processing plants, many have no other career options. But the opening of Purina is a certain kind of person capable of being cruel on a level that most of us probably can't even understand. And especially doing that, like you hear in the beginning of the song, and then sleeping well at night takes a type of personality that I don't possess, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't possess it. Obviously human beings are free to make whatever choices they make, and I'm not going to sit here and evangelize for anybody's life in a certain way. If I could have my way, I wish people would voluntarily choose to seek out ways that reduce the ways they contribute to the suffering of sentient beings. But I can't make choices for other people. So in the lead up to this episode, I've been in varying stages of depression that I snap myself out of in order to prepare for these conversations. It has been, I've had kind of a hard winter this year, harder than normal. I think a lot of people have probably feel the same. I don't think I'm special in that regard. But one of the things that crosses my mind when I'm coping with, like being in a depression or whatever, is I start feeling like, my values start to slip a little bit. I'm like, screw it. I should just eat whatever I want because nothing matters and we're all going to die anyway, right? So this week, I rewatched Earthlings, which I hadn't seen in a long time. Sometimes I'll revisit the book Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. Sometimes I'll reread some Peter Singer. And I feel such a deep pang of empathy watching terrified Earthlings who are every bit as alive as me get beaten or electrocuted or cut or tortured or punched or dragged or experimented on. And I realize I feel this too deeply. And these moments of like depression, like I realize the never ending depression of animals in a laboratory, or animals in last chance shelters where being euthanized is the next step, or like a pig with a cable tied around its leg being dragged across a holding pen, or cows staring at the floor as a stream of their own blood like runs down their chin onto the floor. And that's depression. And I'm like, holy smokes. So that's kind of like what this song has had me thinking about. Mercy, empathy, looking at real sadness, and forcing myself to not look away whenever I feel like I might be on the verge of giving up some of the values that I hold dear.
Absolutely, Greg. And something that added to my frustration while preparing for this was seeing, again, people's YouTube comments while kind of combing through them for our segment where we share some things that we find. And if just songs about vegetarianism and veganism and animal rights attract a particularly vocal group of YouTube responders or people on the internet, whether they're fans or who knows if people don't know the band, why they would comment, like, this makes me want bacon, those sort of things. And then taking that idea, and I think with the irony this song points out, how many people would have said that, right, if the opening audio was a dog being kicked, right, with pigs being as smart as the average dog.
Yeah.
And even if it weren't, it still has feelings and has pain and fear and connection to other animals. So I think my frustration definitely comes from if a person like listens and they say, yeah, I like the song, but not for me. Sure. But it's that sort of trolling of people who want to have like have conversations about this, but also who want to ask themselves more rather than just telling other people what to do or what not to do.
Yeah, and those are the kinds of people that, like, the first people that you talked about, the people who do want to question, who do want to grow, and who do come at conversations from a non-trolling perspective. Those are the people that I actually want to talk to. Those are the people who I'm actually interested in engaging with. The people who just troll for the sake of trolling just truly just bore me, honestly, because their agenda, like they show you their whole selves, like literally like in the first couple of sentences. And like, oh, this person is just coming at this with like, just to mess with me. You know what I mean? And, that whatever, man, like if that's how you want to spend your life, have at it. But that is it's pretty boring to me. But so I was also thinking about a term lately, right? The term like speciesism.
Right.
This is just such an interesting term to me because the definition of speciesists allow the interests of their own species to override the interests of other species who are every bit as alive as them. And Chris's Patreon episode goes into this very deeply, but the reason humans tend to feel such righteousness in the way they treat other species is due to quote unquote intelligence, and intelligence with which we've managed to bring our ecological environment to the brink of collapse while steamrolling environments, causing mass extinctions, causing endless and immeasurable suffering to other species, and being pretty much essentially engaged in perpetual warfare against each other within our own species for almost the entire existence of our species. So whenever I think about intelligence as being a reason for being speciesist or being interested in dominating other species, the argument can be made that we might be the worst species, and we're the ones who think that we're so smart. That's just my view. I'm not asking anybody to change their mind or anything, whatever. I'm not in the mind-changing business, but everyone can make as much of a choice on any topic that they wish. But I just find it really interesting how the ways that humans treat other animals are essentially about domination and being on top and saying this is like our right or whatever. But, anyway, so let's get into some of these lines here.
Yeah, I'm going to read the first part here, Greg, and I am glad that you brought up speciesism because that so directly relates to so many different points made in the song. And the first line is sleeping masters roused to burning homes from beds, steeping toddlers plucked from their watery deaths. And Greg, we've commented endlessly already about how well Chris is able to create incredibly vivid imagery in his lyrics.
Yeah.
And I think the best earliest example of this are on this album, Today's Empires. And what works so well with these lyrics, aside from how well worded they are, how well pieced together they are, and how descriptive they are, it's kind of a bait and switch. The music is super panicked, it's urgent, it's dire, and so are these scenes about humans in danger. But of course, we get to the next lines to find out the song isn't about the humans.
Yeah, I found it super interesting that Chris Deutsch brought up Bambi and Tippy, who roused the humans from beds, who saved the toddlers from their watery deaths. I love the first few lines that actual animals inducted into the Purina Hall of Fame are featured in the opening of this song. Chris Deutsch talks about Bambi, a cute chihuahua who saved the life of a visiting friend by awakening her after a fire started in the house. The visitor, who suffered from asthma, was asleep at the time of the fire and believed she would have been asphyxiated had it not been for Bambi. So another interesting thing is that in 1969, there is another Purina Hall of Fame inductee named Jigs, who is a young Siamese cat who roused a sleeping family when a fire broke out on Christmas morning. And one resident died in the fire, but two kids and a grandma escaped from a fire in the house because of Jigs, the Siamese cat. Jigs passed out in the fiery apartment, was rescued during the fire, and had to be revived outside. So in 1968 and 1969, you have two animals inducted into the Purina Hall of Fame that rescued families from burning buildings, essentially. And you and Chris talked about what kind of animals get inducted. And I looked through about 10 random years of all the Purina Hall of Fame inductee years, and I only found dogs and cats. So I'm not sure if there's any other species that have been inducted into the Purina Hall of Fame, but all I've seen are dogs and cats so far. But as far as your steeping toddlers plucked from their watery deaths line, Chris Deutsch brought up Tippy, a 1968 inductee who was inducted with Bambi. And this story is truly amazing because Tippy's story happened in the Niagara River, which is 3 miles from my house. Niagara River separates Fort Erie, Ontario from Buffalo, New York. And Tippy rescued some kids from the water. So if anybody's been on that stretch of land, either on the Fort Erie side or on the Buffalo side, you know that the Niagara River is hardcore. It is a terrifying stretch of river. The water is so fast, it is completely scary. So Tippy was a 6-month-old shepherd lab mix who leapt into the Niagara River when it was icy, even scarier, to pull an 8-year-old boy to safety. And then once Tippy got the 8-year-old boy out, jumped back in the water to save another kid, but it was too late to get the second kid. But like Tippy is this like 6-month-old dog who did that, which is so wild. And then another Purina inductee is Maud in 1983, who is a German shepherd. And Maud saved a 3-year-old girl from drowning in Pictou Harbor in Canada. But, Maud grabbed this kid by her overalls and pulled the child out of some deep water. So like we have these examples of all these animals who rescue these kiddos or families, and they are, inducted into the Purina Hall of Fame in the first couple of lines of the song. So there's a little bit of a backstory for these are real examples that happened in the 1960s up through the 1980s that I found directly on Purina's website. So anybody can go check those out if they want.
And the next part, Greg says, ribbons, plaques, and soft soap are the ephemeral rewards paid to the slaves whose selfless acts accord a higher value to their masters, while parting gifts, bolt pistols, console the rest. And with both of us being Midwesterners, although you're relocated, Greg, I'm guessing that like county or state fairs were probably an annual part of your childhood. Am I right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I've been to so many. The State Fair in Missouri is in Sedalia, and I went several times as a kid.
So this is kind of how I process that, or how I hear that. The ribbons and plaques go hand in hand with fairs. And those who might not be familiar with what American and possibly the Canadian tradition of an agricultural fair is, it's kind of like a carnival with small amusement park rides, and there's food, but then there are a whole bunch of farmers who enter their chickens, goats, pigs, rabbits, cows into competitions to win prizes, kind of like a dog show, for best steer or best hen. And the animals are judged and voted on. They're all based on criteria deemed important by humans. The winners are selected. There are ribbons and there are plaques that are awarded. Then there's an auction and the animals are sold and then generally slaughtered afterward. And that wasn't really clear to me as a kid. Each summer in August, my family would go to the county fair. We would ride the rides. We get a corn dog or a beef sandwich and walk around through the exhibits to see the animals on display. And Greg, before you mentioned that, you're not a farmer and you don't know what it's like to be like a factory worker, and I'm here with you. So that applies to me. But what I don't understand for me is like looking through details of this today is say like waking up at 4 a.m. every single morning to tend to an animal that I've held captive, grooming it, addressing its needs as a result of that captivation. Like if it is a sheep, shearing its wool or milking it if it's a cow, doing that for months. And then like in the case of the largest auction in my nearby state, Illinois, the biggest auction in its history, a steer was sold for $100,000, raised by a girl who got up every day to take care of it. And it was bought by AT&T, Monsanto, and local agribusiness firms, or other steers that are sold for meat, or castrated pigs that are sold to nearby universities. And like I mentioned to Chris Deutsch, I think of like the dark money of the animal exploitation industry, whether it's tax subsidies to the meat industry or things that I enjoy that are funded by the annihilation of animals. It seems impossible to really know the scale and scope of its impact. But back to this idea of awarding animals only to destroy them almost immediately after giving them some stupid ribbon or a plaque. I found this from a county fair website from Wisconsin, and pay attention to the change in the tone here. Fuzzy bunnies of all sizes, shapes, and colors are exhibited each year at the fair. Stop by the rabbit building to see rabbits with short ears and long ears, small rabbits or large rabbits, and learn about the different breeds of rabbits that are shown. Judging of rabbits takes place on Friday with pet rabbits, then purebred breeds. There is also a great educational exhibit in this building to learn about raising rabbits. Market rabbits, single fryers, meat pens, and roaster rabbits are a part of the Saturday evening quality market animal sale. And I couldn't believe that. So like fuzzy, cute, flopsy bunnies to learn about and take a picture with, then to throw into your oven to feast off its flesh after petting it. Like, no, thank you.
Oh my God. Well, and I also found an article from the Concord Monitor newspaper in New Hampshire about entering cattle in a fair and bathing them, polishing their hooves, cleaning out their ears for days in advance of a judged fair. Like we have these fairs where we parade these animals out like trophies so a winner can get a prize, money, and accolades all on the backs of the appearance of a sentient living creature with no choice in the matter.
Yeah, right.
I didn't even know that they get killed right after the fair. That's even worse. Like I was just like,
yeah,
we just parade them out there and like la-di-da, and we give them their prizes and stuff. And then, so now that I know that they probably go right to their deaths immediately afterwards, that's a little gruesome. It's a little worse. But the parting gifts, bolt pistols, console the rest line is really intriguing to me. People might remember the bolt pistol from the No Country for Old Men movie,
Right.
and from the Cormac McCarthy book. So some animals get pampered or shown off, like my dogs and my cats. Some animals, my hilarious retired old grouchy Westie girls get to lounge in scraps of sunshine inside my warm house in the the pieces of sunshine that bathe the hardwood floors. But others live lives of terror from start to finish and end gruesomely and end suddenly. So this lyric refers to a technique known as captive bolt stunning, and I found some information of it at the Humane Slaughter Association in the UK. So here are some graphic descriptions, somewhat similar to what I read at length when we did our Sandor Katz recipe on head cheese. So here's a quote from hsa.org.uk on captive bolt stunning. Captive bolt stunning followed by bleeding or pithing can be used for emergency killing of animals where a free bullet is impractical for safety reasons. Certification and licensing may be necessary for the use of this method. A captive bolt stunner fires a retractable bolt against the animal's head and in many cases into the animal's brain, rendering it immediately unconscious. The animal will collapse, but there may be some involuntary movement of the limbs. There is likely to be some bleeding from the hole in the skull made by the bolt and from the nose of the animal. A rapid death is ensured by bleeding or pithing the animal immediately after stunning. Whilst both of these procedures are humane when carried out correctly, they may be distressing to watch and require a competent and confident operator. Ugh. So when I think about, go ahead.
Yeah, humane, huh?
Yeah. So when I think about the killing technique, I find myself coming back to the death penalty in the United States and the work of death penalty lawyer Brian Stevenson. So through his work over the years, Stevenson found the error rate of conviction for people on death row is 1 in 9 wrongly convicted. So he rightly states that what a stunning error rate this is, 1 in 9. Imagine 1 out of every 9 planes crashing. Well, that's currently our failure rate for people on death row, 1 in 9. So then I got to thinking that since humans basically just destroy animals with impunity and hardly a second's hesitation, to say nothing of how often humans destroy other humans, I got to wondering what the efficacy of bolt pistol stunning actually is. And I found a study from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. So the study was 998 cattle that were bolt stunned and slaughtered over the course of several days at a facility where 30 animals per hour are killed for a total of 200 per day. So the EU implemented new laws in 2013 for monitoring bolt stun process quality. 84% were adequately stunned of the 998 prior to slaughter, and the rest had to be repeatedly stunned or were partially conscious when their throats were slit. So bulls were inadequately stunned at 3 times the rate of other cattle. So that's in the EU and not in the US, just to be clear. So the researchers on the surface observed 16% were not stunned correctly to the naked eye, right? So 84 were stunned adequately, 16% were not. But then they closely observed the skulls post-slaughter and found that a further 10% who they thought were adequately stunned were actually not adequately stunned because of the bolt pistol markings. So 14 bulls in the study were found to have had been bolted between 3 and 5 times. So that's like ending with like 5 punctures of the skull. Bulls were most frequently inaccurately shot. Bolt guns were observed to be poorly serviced, and many shooters were found to have had limited experience. So Once the bolt gun is used, then the animal has to actually be killed. So the amount of time, so there's like a procedure, right? So you stun them, and then there is a recommended period of time that the animal should be cut be after the bolt stunning to reduce the likelihood that they will regain consciousness. Okay. So if enough time passes after the bolt pistol stun to the head, the animal is more likely to wake up, right? So the suggested EU European Union period of time between the bolt gun and the throat cutting from ear to ear is 60 seconds, right? So after the bolt gun goes in, you're supposed to slit the throat within 60 seconds. In the study from Sweden, the average amount of time between the shot and the stick was 105 seconds. 0 cattle in the study were slit within the recommended 60 seconds. So every second that passes, the chance apparently goes up that animals will regain consciousness while also waking up with a severe brain injury, right? So make of that what you will. But all I really have to say about this is I'm glad I know exactly what this entails. I'm glad I know the failure rate of the bolt pistol stunning. I'm glad I know that animals aren't killed within the recommended period of time post stunning to reduce the likelihood that they'll wake back up. I'm glad I know these things. It's sickening. It makes me like nauseous reading about this stuff all week long. But yeah, I mean, I dug into some statistics here for captive bolt stunning and found some interesting stuff.
And you can't help but think it's probably worse in the U.S.
It
right?
has to be.
Like,
how could it not be?
The numbers. Right. Well, Greg, I'm going to jump back really quickly also to the idea of the soap. So I mentioned the ribbons and the plaques, but the soft soap. So I see this as either as like the animals deemed unworthy of veneration or protection or even meat either get made into soap, like even the company Soft Soap on its website says many products do not contain animal-derived ingredients, which of course the implication is that many of them do, or the discarded, the discarded unwanted animals get the soap, like concentrated forms of it, along with other household products, oven cleaners, abrasive solvents rubbed into their eyes and caked onto their skin for experiments. And this is something I'm not nearly as knowledgeable or careful of. So I don't eat meat, but I don't know nearly enough about what companies like animal testing policies are. And with that, Greg, I mean, just think of like the selfish, racist double standard of people's outrage toward the eating of dogs in other countries while being completely ignorant of the fact that here in the US, dogs are bred and raised for the sole purpose of being tested and experimented on and tortured by corporations and universities. So, according to the US Department of Agriculture's animal usage report, almost 60,000 plus dogs were used in US experimentation in the year 2016 alone. And the reported number of all animals used for experimentation was 820,812. You mentioned Peter Singer already. He wrote about this in Animal Liberation. And this really struck me, though. His point is that it like the breed itself shouldn't. So oftentimes beagles are used because of their size, their even temperament, their submissive nature, and their trusting of humans.
Oh,
so think of that, like the traits that humans have bred into animals being used against them. It's sickening and infuriating, but it shouldn't matter if it's a beagle or a Westie or a mutt or a snail or something else. Like it's a living creature. But I think that it speaks to like this lack of awareness where we like to degrade and put down other people for what they do, while the things that we support that we don't even know support are in many ways far worse. So I found this from The Intercept. It says, even when legal standards are adhered to, and oftentimes they're not, the permitted abuse to which these dogs are subjected is horrifying. They are often purposely starved or put into a state of severe thirst to induce behavior they would otherwise not engage in. They are frequently bred deliberately to have crippling, excruciating diseases, or sometimes are brought into life just to have their organs, eyes, and other body parts removed and studied as puppies and then quickly killed. They are force fed laundry detergents, pesticides, and industrial chemicals to the point of continuous vomiting and death. They are injected with lethal pathogens such as salmonella or rabies. They have artificial sweetener injected into their veins that causes the dog's testicles to shrink before they are killed and exsanguinated. Holes are drilled into their skulls so that viruses can be injected into their brains. And all of that is perfectly legal.
Ugh. Oh my God. Well, you know what's really interesting? So many people in the world do know darn well about these atrocities that are committed against animals and have done a lot to fight against it, right? So if we
Right.
look at the line in the song, I just sit and watch the box cars roll by and wait, patient, unattended, a package under a terminal bench. Like, this is a wild visual, right? This is
Mhm.
the person who knows full well what is going on behind these buildings that do not have glass walls, that you cannot see inside, that you are not welcome inside to film what is happening. And this is a person I just sit and watch the box cars roll by and wait to act, right?
Mhm.
This is the Chris Hanna of another life that he didn't live, right? As far as I know, maybe he has. But there is some chatter on the Genius entry for this song about any history behind this, and Chris didn't go into any sort of specific eco activism in his Purina episode, but he does get into it. And he talks about the eco activist movement, which got quickly categorized as a form of domestic terrorism by the FBI. And I think you mentioned via text message that you found this as well, but I was reading a press release or a press conference transcript from February 2002 from Counterterrorism Division Domestic Terror Section Chief James Jarboe,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Jarboe said during the past, so this is 2002, right? So just post 9/11, like 4 months after 9/11. During the past decade, we have witnessed dramatic changes in the nature of the terrorist threat. In the 1990s, right-wing extremism overtook left-wing terrorism as the most dangerous domestic terrorist threat to the country. During the past several years, special interest extremism, as characterized by the Animal Liberation Front, ALF, and the Earth Liberation Front, ELF, has emerged as a serious terrorist threat. Generally, extremist groups engage in much activity that is protected by constitutional guarantees of free speech and assembly. Law enforcement becomes involved when the volatile talk of these groups transgresses into unlawful action. The FBI estimates that the ALF, ELF have committed more than 600 criminal acts in the United States since 1996, resulting in damages in excess of $43 million. So this was known as the Green Scare, which was documented heavily by Will Potter, who I know that you know about. And what's so surreal about it is if you think about recent events involving extreme right-wing and white supremacist groups, is that environmental and animal rights activists got classified as a more dangerous population because
Right.
of their because government and industry were allied. And I found a quote from a former domestic terrorism analyst at the Department of Homeland Security named Daryl Johnson, who explained the reason law enforcement took a less aggressive approach to right-wing white supremacists and anti-government attackers after 9/11. So regarding the industry, Johnson said, you don't have a bunch of companies coming forward saying, I wish you'd do something about these right-wing extremists, Johnson said. He says, if enough people lobbied Congress about white nationalists and how it's affecting their business activity, I'm sure you'll get legislation. So you got these hardcore offenses and action against animal and earth liberation front groups because they were messing with industry, who is very allied with government, whereas you didn't have the same kind of action against people who have gone on to commit very dangerous acts, who have caused human death, right-wing extremist groups. So statistically, far-right and white supremacist organizations are on average responsible for a dozen deaths a year, but to date, so-called eco-terrorists are responsible for 0 human deaths. They just affect the pocketbook of corporate industries that do cause animal death and environmental degradation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Greg, and why then, to go back to that idea, don't we celebrate and revere the humans who save the lives of non-human animals? I mean, are their actions not just as worthy of praise or even more, considering that they have more to lose in taking these sort of direct actions against government and industry? And I really love what Chris Deutsch connected to with resisting tyrannical government. I really missed that idea, since I think the language and the music and the tone are so different between this and that song, even though there's this overlap of like daydreaming of what it would actually be like to take direct violent action. It could almost feel like an actual declaration rather than wishful thinking, because the song is just so different than, the image created by riding a bike with a bomb strapped to your back. This feels far more real. And prosecutions, like you mentioned, of environmentalists, these things were commonplace, but with eco-terrorist being a term coined in the 1980s, it's crazy how this song really addresses an issue that is just going to become a prime directive of the US federal government, of course, unknowingly, as the album came out just 7 months before 9/11.
And I keep thinking about this visual of this person sitting and waiting to act, right? Watching the boxcars roll by with animals inside, wanting to do something to make their lives better and to punish the people who were causing their captivity. But it's just super interesting to me because I feel like in another life, if Chris, he talks about this in his episode, like if he hadn't been on stage talking about these issues in front of crowds, he could easily have become a huge target of federal authorities.
Yeah.
He could have burned down animal agriculture facilities, and he could have essentially become an animal vigilante, right? But if he had done it with his history of talking about it on stage, he would have easily been a suspect in federal domestic terrorism cases. And he talks about it at length in his episode, and that was such an interesting segment. But, jumping off the post 9/11 presser from Jarbo that I read, I found an article from Aileen Brown in The Intercept from 2019 titled "How a Movement That Never Killed Anyone Became the FBI's #1 domestic terrorism threat."
Yeah.
Which documents the capture of Joe Dibby of the Animal Liberation Front and Earth Liberation Front after 12 years on the run. And another article I read about Dibby has his wanted posters in it, which has his name in big bold letters. And Dibby is actually Syrian, and his name is Yusuf Diba. And he has a very Middle Eastern sounding middle name of Mahmoud. So his wanted posters, very in big, bright red letters, say "Wanted by the FBI, Joseph Mahmoud Dibby." And, Dibby's story is documented in an amazing Oregon Public Broadcasting article called "The Many Lives of Joseph Dibby." And I can't recommend it enough. I linked it on Twitter on March 12th as well. The vaguely defined uses of terrorism in charges against eco-activists in the 1990s is pretty wild.
Right.
That article goes up through the confirmation of Merrick Garland as Attorney General in 2021. So it's a very current article about the current state of affairs regarding people who allegedly did this kind of work as depicted in this song, of acting against animal agriculture facilities in a way that really impacted their viability as functioning facilities,
Right, Greg. And while I was vaguely aware of some of these things, of the crackdown against environmental activists following 9/11, after years of lobbying from profiteers of the animal industrial complex, like you mentioned, the fur and the meat industry, them having a stake on it. No one's really has a stake in supporting or the toppling of far right corporations. At least don't have a stake in toppling far right extremists. I had just a few broad strokes of really the details, but preparing for this episode, I read a bit about Operation Backfire, which is ultimately what led to the arrest of Joe Dibby. So when the FBI partnered with other agencies and combined multiple different investigations into one on environmentalists and their actions and animal liberation activists. So not long after 9/11, the FBI declared the number one domestic terrorism threat is the eco-terrorism animal rights movement. So, Greg, I found a PDF called Operation Backfire, a survival guide for environmental and animal rights activists by the National Lawyers Guild. And a few things really stood out in the pamphlet. One thing was the laws such as the Animal Enterprise Protection Act, the AEPA, and the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, the AETA. They impose more serious sanctions for certain crimes if committed by animal rights activists. In some cases, the laws criminalize traditionally protected First Amendment activities. Prosecutors often request terrorism enhancements to extend prison sentences in cases involving animal rights and environmental activists. And in addition to longer prison terms, those sentences under terrorism laws or enhancements face harsher treatment in prison, including the possible placement in highly restrictive units. And to be charged under the AETA, an animal rights activist really need only to join in a course of conduct to protest or boycott an animal related business, and the use of the internet and traditionally protected speech like leafleting. That's what Will Potter was arrested for.
Mm-hmm.
Sidewalk chalking and home protests can become the basis of an indictment. So I found an example from the AEPA. It was used against two activists in Wisconsin for releasing animals from fur farms. And then the AETA was used against four activists who were arrested on terrorism charges as a result of their participation in protests against the University of California's animal research programs. Protests. In another case, two activists were arrested in connection with the release of hundreds of minks from a fur farm in Utah. And I'm pointing these out because all of these actions, Greg, are nonviolent.
Yeah.
This is free speech. There's almost no overlap with previous definitions of terrorism. And another article from The Intercept called The Green Scare, the one that you mentioned, I think that's the one you mentioned. So it says that no new law was required to treat eco-saboteurs as terrorists in the wake of 9/11. Of 70 federal prosecutions of radical environmentalists and animal rights activists who were identified, 52 did not result in charges under anti-terrorism laws, yet the defendants were repeatedly called terrorists by the Justice Department in public statements and internal communications. So this makes me kind of think, in response to his book, The Monkey Wrench Gang, environmentalist Edward Abbey said, "Would I blow up the Grand Canyon Dam? No. But if someone else wanted to do it, I'd be there holding the flashlight." But I say that because now it's as though it's illegal to even have the flashlight or to consider buying one.
Yeah, it's really scary whenever you think about actually acting in defense of something that you believe strongly in, and the fact that you can be classified as a terrorist without causing any human death, and instead actually saving many non-human lives. it's pretty interesting and challenging to think about. You know what I mean?
Again, that we value property over life.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about this visual of this person who's doing this action, all these people that you've just mentioned, all these examples that we've just talked about for the last little bit, and we think about this next line where it says, a short fuse to scatter, steady hands if I forget to remember that better lives have been lived in the margins, locked in the prisons, and lost on the gallows than have ever been enshrined in palaces, which is such an amazing line, just beyond incredible. This is like peak lyrical writing. And Chris ponders this line in his Patreon podcast episode about this song. And he says, this must be a reference to something that I read somewhere, right? And I don't know about you, but I actually was like Googling various forms of this phrase, and I couldn't find a different version of this. And I'm not saying that one doesn't exist, but as far as I can tell, on March 13th, 2021, it doesn't seem like there's another paraphrased or rewritten version of this song that Chris derived it from. I don't know if you had any luck, but it seems like Chris came up with this line like entirely. You may be, am I wrong? Did you find anything? Were you able to find any other references to where Chris may have adapted a different line from a historical writing?
Well, something does come to mind, but I'm going to wait.
Okay, cool. So, the something that Chris Deutsch said about this particular line reframed this entire line for me. So when Chris Deutsch said that dogs and cats are enshrined in the palaces, not all dogs, not all cats, the lucky ones, right? Because there are many that live very unlucky lives. When Chris Deutsch said that dogs and cats are enshrined in the palaces, it reframed literally everything about the way I have thought about this song my whole life.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Even though this song is absolutely about animals, I always humanized these closing lines. I
know exactly what you mean.
Dude, it's crazy. I always thought these ending lines were about people, right?
Yeah.
And whenever I thought about, being enshrined in palaces, it switched my train of thought right when this line hit, and went from thinking about animals to thinking about people. So I pictured a kingdom with dungeons and gallows and a king in a palace and poor people in the village looking up at the palace. But geez, when Chris Deutsch said the dogs are enshrined in palaces, like their suburban home lives, you know what I mean? I just went, oh gosh. And that's why I'm so thrilled by our guests on this show, dude. Talking to some people besides you and me is endlessly interesting to me on this show. And when Chris said that the lives that are enshrined in the palaces are our dogs and cats who live with us, it was just a mind-blowing moment, because I don't know why, but I've always humanized the last couple lines in this song.
I know exactly what you mean. And I had that same exact thought, that why would it also only be about humans?
Yeah, exactly. It's so crazy. Oh, God. So what did you think about this line?
So you're right. I love how Chris Deutsch reframed that and flipped it and took, again, just the anthropocentric element out of it to see that it's not just about us, but maybe because we're humans or because it's me, it's hard to think of that line just in terms of like non-human animals still, right? Like I still just see humans in that. And so this is why this is probably one of those like top shelf propaganda lyrics. It so succinctly describes so much about how the world works, whether we're talking about humans or non-human animals. I think it has this built-in reminder that it's better to be among the marginalized in an unfair society, fighting for something better than to be at the top of like the political and the economic pyramid. And, Greg, you mentioned already prisons and imprisonment rates and the rates of executions, and the fact that like again, I still think of this in terms of people, that 1 out of every 5 prisoners in the world in the US is in the US, right? Like that. And we call ourselves the land of the free. That seems to be like just a joke. Or now that it's easier to detain, arrest, and imprison people, in addition to the laws I already mentioned that infringe upon civil liberties, like Kentucky's Republican majority Senate on Thursday move forward a bill that's going to make it easier to arrest protesters for insulting a police officer. Right? And so like our acts of resistance being like lessened and lessened. And with 170 people, looking at numbers, have been wrongly convicted and sentenced to death in the US. Over 170 people, those individuals have been exonerated. And one thing that I read was about a 14-year-old black teen who was executed in South Carolina in 1944. His trial took 3 hours. All of the white jury took 10 minutes to find him guilty, and he sobbed as he was strapped in and masked. His executioners used a Bible as a booster seat because he was so small.
Oh my God.
So that, like, this makes me think, like, how many more are out there? You know, this is George, I'm not sure if it's Stinney or Steiny, George Stinney. How many more of him are out there? You know, like thinking back to Descartes of all people, he argued that he would not believe anything if there was any sign of doubt in that belief. And my doubt kind of now is in the social contract, the theory that government power is derived from the people in order to protect their rights. Sometimes, Greg, I can't help but just want to scrap the entire thing and start fresh. If it means that we don't criminalize being humane, we no longer prosecute compassion, and we stop celebrating the executioners.
Yeah, I think this is one of those central dilemmas that Chris has been bashing his head against the wall for 30 years about. You know what I mean? The fact that like that ties in nicely to the whispered closing lines. It's not your fault. There's nothing you can do. It's just the way it is. There's nothing we can do. And it's just so chilling. It's like the subliminal suggestion of people with power to those without power. Just sit back, accept your complacency.
Right.
You can't make the world a better place. You think you can, but you really can't. And you'll enter this world and you'll exit this world. And this is how it is when you were born. And this is how it is when you'll die. And you won't be a part of making the world a better place. So just accept what we've created for you. You can write letters, you can protest all to your heart's content, but you're still going to accomplish nothing with regards to almost anything you care about. And you know, if the endless letter writing and phone calls and emails to your representatives can't yield a change beyond, can't yield the changes that you would like, and you go beyond that, rest assured that the FBI will classify you as a terrorist as their very next move. It's it's pretty gross, you know?
Absolutely. And then the solo and then the heartbeat.
Yeah.
You know, that's not really Chris's voice saying that, right? He does think there's something you could do. It's just maybe figuring it out what it is, figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, wow. Okay. Well, did you find any good comments or anything on YouTube when you were digging through the archives here?
There were not many, I thought, because they're all like, no, I want to eat veal. And I'm like, you're a scumbag. So one is in reference to what you just read, Greg. It's not your fault, that line.
Yeah.
And the person said, first time I heard that, I was like, sure, we can do something about this. Duh, sarcasm. And this song, of course, loads of other stuff made me vegan. And I'm still grateful for the message propaganda he has for all of us. Be the change that you want.
Yeah. My my major YouTube comments that I found address something, and I'd like to take a little more of a lighthearted approach to this. So it seems that on YouTube, whenever there are high quality live versions of this song, whether it be at Melkweg in Amsterdam, whether it be at the Leeds show in the UK, or whether it be the Sydney Mosh Cam video, it seems like there is a conspiracy out there, Keith, for when people film videos of propaganda
Oh, no solos.
with high quality recordings. Every time I watch a high quality video of this song of a
Yeah.
live performance, the cameraman makes a conscious and concerted decision to never show Chris on camera during the guitar solo, and it makes me crazy. If you think I'm even playing here, go watch these highly edited videos that I'm talking about. The multi-camera recording misses literally every super impressive section of this solo. If you're a cameraman filming this and you edit out the video of the solo and you choose to omit one of the greatest moments of one of the greatest band's catalog, for shame. If you film this band playing this song in the future and you point your camera at anywhere besides Chris Hanna playing the solo, shame on you. Oh God. And case in point, I found many YouTube comments explicitly about that. One person wrote, "Unreal song and live version. Pity the camera editor hadn't a clue and missed out on the solos." Somebody else said, "How can you possibly mess up the camera work like this? One of the greatest punk rock guitar solos of all time, and you precisely show every instrument except the one playing a solo." Ridiculously bad. So I was fully engrossed in the YouTube comments addressing the absolutely crystal clear conspiracy among camera shooting people at concerts to never film Chris Hanna playing this solo on camera. Made me nuts, and I'm glad to see that it made my fellow YouTube commenters nuts as well. So that's my thoughts on this song for YouTube. Keith, what do you take away from this song?
Greg, this is often the hardest part of the episode for me because I want to try to sum up the words and the ideas that were already stated far more articulately than I ever could state them. So I try to think instead, what next? Like, what am I going to do with this information or this message? And this week, actually, with my students, I shared this quote from the late scientist Stephen Jay Gould with my students. And as I was going through this quote, I was like, oh man, I have to talk about that this weekend. And he said, "I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops." So, Greg, it doesn't really matter how smart Einstein was if our world is stacked in a way that means only people born into similar circumstances as Einstein actually get to be Einsteins. And for me, like this week, watching the news about, say, the famine in Yemen, where 400,000 children face starvation, while looking over and then seeing my son snuggled in his like $300 Fisher Price swing,
Yeah.
knowing he has enough to eat simply because where he was born, like what other than luck determines our lives and our fate and how much suffering we experience? Like whether that's a person, a child, or a dog, like what determines, say, if a dog is born and is loved and cared for by a member of your family, or if it's in a crate where it's force fed a pesticide and then killed so its organs can be studied. That we're all here, human and non-human, for such a short period of time. But built into that brief time is just so much suffering, and that suffering seems to be the system itself of the animal industrial complex, and that I'm not going to be able to legislate that away. I'm not going to light the fuse. Maybe I would hold the flashlight if someone else would, but probably not. But I guess what I'm thinking about most is how I can further divest by doing more than just not eating meat from the system of cruelty.
Yeah. There's so many decisions that we make every day, and it's really hard because our tax dollars are used against our will to invest in things that we don't personally believe in,
Right.
which really sucks. And I don't have the answer for a lot of things like that. But as far as this song goes, a quote from Pierre Trubetskoy really jumps out. It's like, why should man expect his prayer for mercy to be heard by what is above him when he shows no mercy to what is under him?
Yeah.
And, you know, I've rewatched some movies lately, Forks Over Knives, Speciesism, Earthlings, Cowspiracy. I enjoyed these. Many listening to this have likely seen those movies as well. Or, you know, Jonathan Safran Foer's work or Peter Singer's work and so many others. I've really been, you know, kind of struggling with the depression this winter, like I said earlier, and I give it my all to be energetic for these conversations. But a lot of my week between recording, I'm sort of in like a zombified sitting at my desk, staring into my computer, sullen sort of state. And I find myself a lot of times asking, why bother? We just live in this Groundhog Day world when it comes to like values, like, oh, if I live my values, blah, why does it even matter? Every day is the same. But, you know, a conversation about this song reconnects me to my animal nature, realizing I'm an animal and the living beings that share this earth with me are just as validly alive as I am, and realizing that participating in the cycles of pain, suffering, torture, and death is not good. I am 100% against the death penalty when it comes to humans, and this song has always and does ask me to continually question my role in the death penalties of other living beings.
Right.
So, you know, I've seen the evidence. The evidence is exhausting. I don't need more proof. We all need to do better. And, you know, maybe you and I in the coming days can talk about some things beyond just not eating meat, because like clearly that's not enough to make me, you know, completely satisfied with the role that I play in all these systems that were in existence before I was born and will exist after I die. But if there's anything I can maybe do a little better at, maybe I should try. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, you know?
Yeah, same.
You want to rate this bad boy?
Oh, it's a 5.
Oh,
Obvious.
yeah.
This is a song that wasn't a 5 for me right away.
Interesting.
Well, I don't mean like the beginning of this project. I think probably when I first heard it, you know, it's been a 5 for a long time. But I think the lyrics were a challenge for me for a really long time. Just intellectually, but also personally, and what it asked me or challenged me to do. I think the music is incredible. I think the fact that there can be these different interpretations, like the humans enshrined, but also the animals enshrined.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the narratives and the details, everything, it's a complete package. The heartbeat, all of that, even with the band sounding so oppressively negative or hopeless or just at their wits' end, with the heartbeat bringing this album to a close, I do feel like there is a sense of hope, and I need that.
Yeah, it's a 5 for me as well. No doubt whatsoever. As if anybody listening to this knew that we were going to say any other thing.
Yeah,
so
right. There'd be a mutiny.
Yeah. So that is our episode on Purina Hall of Fame. Thank you so much to Dr. Chris Deutsch, Sulynn Hago for coming on the show again, to both of you. It's been a pleasure having your involvement in so many episodes now. And if you want to find us on Instagram or Twitter, you can find us at PropagandyPod. If you want to email us, you can do it at propagandapod@gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening. This is a hard, challenging conversation for both of us this evening, I get the impression. And we'll see you next time for another episode of Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.